Chapter 17. Miriam returned slowly toward the tree in which she had left her skirt, her shoes, and her stockings. She was singing blithely, but her song came to a sudden stop when she came within sight of the tree, for there, disporting themselves with glee and pulling and hauling upon her belongings, were a number of baboons. When they saw her, they showed no signs of terror. Instead, they bared their fangs and growled at her. What was there to fear in a single she? Tarmangani? Nothing, absolutely nothing. In the open plain beyond the forest, the hunters were returning from the day's sport. They were widely separated, hoping to raise a wandering lion on the homeward journey across the plain. The Honorable Morrison Baines rode closest to the forest. As his eyes wandered back and forth across the undulating, shrub-sprinkled ground, they fell upon the form of a creature close beside the thick jungle where it terminated abruptly at the plain's edge. He reined his mount in the direction of his discovery. It was yet too far away for his untrained eyes to recognize it, but as he came closer he saw that it was a horse and was about to resume the original direction of his way when he thought that he discerned a saddle upon the beast's back. He rode a little closer. Yes, the animal was saddled. The Honorable Morrison approached yet nearer, and as he did so his eyes expressed a pleasurable emotion of anticipation, for they had now recognized the pony as the special favorite of Miriam. He galloped to the animal's side. Miriam must be within the wood. The man shuddered a little at the thought of an unprotected girl alone in the jungle that was still, to him, a fearful place of terrors and stealthily stalking death. He dismounted and left his horse beside Miriam's. On foot he entered the jungle. He knew that she was probably safe enough, and he wished to surprise her by coming suddenly upon her. He had gone but a short distance into the wood when he heard a great jabbering in a nearby tree. Coming closer, he saw a band of baboons snarling over something. Looking intently, he saw that one of them held a woman's riding skirt and that others had boots and stockings. His heart almost ceased to beat as he quite naturally placed the most direful explanation upon the scene. The baboons had killed Miriam and stripped this clothing from her body. Morrison shuddered. He was about to call aloud in the hope that after all the girl still lived when he saw her in a tree close beside that was occupied by the baboons, and now he saw that they were snarling and jabbering at her. To his amazement, he saw the girl swing, ape-like, into the tree below the huge beasts. He saw her pause upon a branch a few feet from the nearest baboon. He was about to raise his rifle and put a bullet through the hideous creature that seemed about to leap upon her when he heard the girl speak. He almost dropped his rifle from surprise as a strange jabbering, identical with that of the apes, broke from Miriam's lips. The baboons stopped their snarling and listened. It was quite evident that they were as much surprised as the Honorable Morrison Baines. Slowly and one by one they approached the girl. She gave not the slightest evidence of fear of them. They quite surrounded her now, so that Baines could not have fired without endangering the girl's life. But he no longer desired to fire. He was consumed with curiosity. For several minutes the girl carried on what could be nothing less than a conversation with the baboons, and then with seeming alacrity every article of her apparel in their possession was handed over to her. The baboons still crowded eagerly about her as she donned them. They chattered to her and she chattered back. The Honorable Morrison Baines sat down at the foot of a tree and mopped his perspiring brow. Then he rose and made his way back to his mount. When Miriam emerged from the forest a few minutes later, she found him there, and he eyed her with wide eyes, in which were both wonder and a sort of terror. "I saw your horse here," he explained, "and thought that I would wait and ride home with you. You do not mind?" "Of course not," she replied. "It will be lovely." As they made their way stirrup to stirrup across the plain, the Honorable Morrison caught himself many times watching the girl's regular profile and wondering if his eyes had deceived him, or if, in truth, he really had seen this lovely creature consorting with grotesque baboons and conversing with them as fluently as she conversed with him. The thing was uncanny, impossible, yet he had seen it with his own eyes. And as he watched her, another thought persisted in obtruding itself into his mind. She was most beautiful and very desirable. But what did he know of her? Was she not altogether impossible? Was the scene that he had but just witnessed not sufficient proof of her impossibility? A woman who climbed trees and conversed with the baboons of the jungle? It was quite horrible. Again the Honorable Morrison mopped his brow. Miriam glanced toward him. "You are warm," she said. "Now that the sun is setting, I find it quite cool. Why do you perspire now?" He had not intended to let her know that he had seen her with the baboons, but quite suddenly, before he realized what he was saying, he had blurted it out. "I perspire from emotion," he said. "I went into the jungle when I discovered your pony. I wanted to surprise you, but it was I who was surprised. I saw you in the trees with the baboons." "Yes?" she said quite unemotionally, as though it was a matter of little moment that a young girl should be upon intimate terms with savage jungle beasts. "It was horrible," ejaculated the Honorable Morrison. "Horrible?" repeated Miriam, puckering her brows in bewilderment. "What was horrible about it? They are my friends. Is it horrible to talk with one's friends?" "You were really talking with them, then?" cried the Honorable Morrison. "You understood them, and they understood you?" "Certainly, but they are hideous creatures, degraded beasts of a lower order. How could you speak the language of beasts?" "They are not hideous, and they are not degraded," replied Miriam. "Friends are never that. I lived among them for years before Bwana found me and brought me here. I scarce knew any other tongue than that of the Mongoni. Should I refuse to know them now, simply because I happen, for the present, to live among humans?" "For the present," ejaculated the Honorable Morrison. "You cannot mean that you expect to return to live among them. Come, what foolishness are we talking? The very idea! You are spoofing me, Miss Miriam. You have been kind to these baboons here, and they know you and do not molest you, but that you once lived among them. No, that is preposterous." "But I did, though," insisted the girl, seeing the real horror that the man felt in the presence of such an idea reflected in his tone and manner, and rather enjoying baiting him still further. "Yes, I lived, almost naked, among the great apes and the lesser apes. I dwelt among the branches of the trees. I pounced upon the smaller prey and devoured it, raw. With Korak and Ott, I hunted the antelope and the boar, and I sat upon a tree limb and made faces at Numa, the lion, and threw sticks at him and annoyed him until he roared so terribly in his rage that the earth shook. And Korak built me a lair high among the branches of a mighty tree. He brought me fruits and flesh, he fought for me and was kind to me, until I came to Bwana and my dear, I do not recall that any other than Korak was ever kind to me." There was a wistful note in the girl's voice now, and she had forgotten that she was bantering the Honorable Morrison. She was thinking of Korak. She had not thought of him a great deal of late. For a time, both were silently absorbed in their own reflections as they rode on toward the bungalow of their host. The girl was thinking of a godlike figure, a leopard skin half concealing his smooth, brown hide as he leaped nimbly through the trees to lay an offering of food before her on his return from a successful hunt. Behind him, shaggy and powerful, swung a huge anthropoid ape, while she, Miriam, laughing and shouting her welcome, swung upon a swaying limb before the entrance to her sylvan bower. It was a pretty picture as she recalled it. The other side seldom obtruded itself upon her memory. The long, black nights, the chill, terrible jungle nights, the cold and damp and discomfort of the rainy season, the hideous mouthings of the savage carnivora as they prowled through the Stygian darkness beneath, the constant menace of Sheeta, the panther, and Hista, the snake, the stinging insects, the loathsome vermin. For, in truth, all these had been outweighed by the happiness of the sunny days, the freedom of it all, and, most, the companionship of Korak. The man's thoughts were rather jumbled. He had suddenly realized that he had come mighty near falling in love with this girl of whom he had known nothing up to the previous moment when she had voluntarily revealed a portion of her past to him. The more he thought upon the matter, the more evident it became to him that he had given her his love, that he had been upon the verge of offering her his honorable name. He trembled a little at the narrowness of his escape. Yet he still loved her. There was no objection to that according to the ethics of the Honorable Morrison Baines and his kind. She was a meaner clay than he. He could no more have taken her in marriage than he could have taken one of her baboon friends, nor would she, of course, expect such an offer from him. To have his love would be sufficient honor for her. His name he would, naturally, bestow upon one in his own elevated social sphere. A girl who had consorted with apes, who, according to her own admission, had lived almost naked among them, could have no considerable sense of the finer qualities of virtue. The love that he would offer her then would, far from offending her, probably cover all that she might desire or expect. The more the Honorable Morrison Baines thought upon the subject, the more fully convinced he became that he was contemplating a most chivalrous and unselfish act. Europeans will better understand his point of view than Americans, poor, benighted provincials, who are denied a true appreciation of caste and of the fact that the king can do no wrong. He did not even have to argue the point that she would be much happier amidst the luxuries of a London apartment, fortified as she would be by both his love and his bank account, than lawfully wed to such a one as her social position warranted. There was one question, however, which he wished to have definitely answered before he committed himself even to the program he was considering. Who were Korak and Ott? He asked. Ott was a Mangani, replied Miriam, and Korak a Tarmangani. And what, pray, might a Mangani be, and a Tarmangani? The girl laughed. You are a Tarmangani, she replied. The Mangani are covered with hair. You would call them apes. Then Korak was a white man? He asked. Yes. And he was. Ah, your. He paused, for he found it rather difficult to go on with that line of questioning while the girl's clear, beautiful eyes were looking straight into his. My what? Insisted Miriam, far too unsophisticated in her unspoiled innocence to guess what the Honorable Morrison was driving at. Why? Ah, your brother? He stumbled. No, Korak was not my brother, she replied. Was he your husband, then? He finally blurted. Far from taking offense, Miriam broke into a merry laugh. My husband, she cried. Why? How old do you think I am? I am too young to have a husband. I had never thought of such a thing. Korak was. Why? And now she hesitated too, for she never before had attempted to analyze the relationship that existed between herself and Korak. Why? Korak was just Korak, and again she broke into a gay laugh as she realized the illuminating quality of her description. Looking at her and listening to her, the man beside her could not believe that depravity of any sort or degree entered into the girl's nature, yet he wanted to believe that she had not been virtuous, for otherwise his task was less a sinecure. The Honorable Morrison was not entirely without conscience. For several days, the Honorable Morrison made no appreciable progress toward the consummation of his scheme. Sometimes he almost abandoned it, for he found himself time and again wondering how slight might be the provocation necessary to trick him into making a bona fide offer of marriage to Miriam if he permitted himself to fall more deeply in love with her, and it was difficult to see her daily and not love her. There was a quality about her which, all unknown to the Honorable Morrison, was making his task an extremely difficult one. It was that quality of innate goodness and cleanness which is a good girl's stoutest bulwark and protection, an impregnable barrier that only degeneracy has the effrontery to assail. The Honorable Morrison Baines would never be considered a degenerate. He was sitting with Miriam upon the veranda one evening after the others had retired. Earlier they had been playing tennis, a game in which the Honorable Morrison shone to advantage, as, in truth, he did in most all manly sports. He was telling Miriam stories of London and Paris, of balls and banquets, of the wonderful women and their wonderful gowns, of the pleasures and pastimes of the rich and powerful. The Honorable Morrison was a past master in the art of insidious boasting. His egotism was never flagrant or tiresome. He was never crude in it, for crudeness was a plebeianism that the Honorable Morrison studiously avoided, yet the impression derived by a listener to the Honorable Morrison was one that was not at all calculated to detract from the glory of the House of Baines or from that of its representative. Miriam was entranced. His tales were like fairy stories to this little jungle maid. The Honorable Morrison loomed large and wonderful and magnificent in her mind's eye. He fascinated her, and when he drew closer to her after a short silence and took her hand, she thrilled as one might thrill beneath the touch of a deity, a thrill of exaltation not unmixed with fear. He bent his lips close to her ear. "Miriam," he whispered, "my little Miriam, may I hope to have the right to call you my little Miriam?" The girl turned wide eyes upward to his face, but it was in shadow. She trembled, but she did not draw away. The man put an arm about her and drew her closer. "I love you," he whispered. She did not reply. She did not know what to say. She knew nothing of love. She had never given it a thought, but she did know that it was very nice to be loved, whatever it meant. It was nice to have people kind to one. She had known so little of kindness or affection. "Tell me," he said, "that you return my love." His lips came steadily closer to hers. They had almost touched when a vision of Korak sprang like a miracle before her eyes. She saw Korak's face close to hers, she felt his lips hot against hers, and then for the first time in her life she guessed what love meant. She drew away, gently. "I am not sure," she said, "that I love you. Let us wait. There is plenty of time. I am too young to marry yet, and I am not sure that I should be happy in London or Paris. They rather frighten me." How easily and naturally she had connected his avowal of love with the idea of marriage. The Honorable Morrison was perfectly sure that he had not mentioned marriage. He had been particularly careful not to do so. And then she was not sure that she loved him. That, too, came rather in the nature of a shock to his vanity. It seemed incredible that this little barbarian should have any doubts whatever as to the desirability of the Honorable Morrison Baines. The first flush of passion cooled. The Honorable Morrison was enabled to reason more logically. The start had been all wrong. It would be better now to wait and prepare her mind gradually for the only proposition which his exalted estate would permit him to offer her. He would go slow. He glanced down at the girl's profile. It was bathed in the silvery light of the great tropic moon. The Honorable Morrison Baines wondered if it were to be so easy a matter to go slow. She was most alluring. Miriam rose. The vision of Korak was still before her. "Good night," she said. "It is almost too beautiful to leave." She waved her hand in a comprehensive gesture which took in the starry heavens, the great moon, the broad, silvered plain, and the dense shadows in the distance that marked the jungle. "Oh, how I love it!" "You would love London more," he said earnestly, "and London would love you. You would be a famous beauty in any capital of Europe. You would have the world at your feet, Miriam." "Good night," she repeated, and left him. The Honorable Morrison selected a cigarette from his crested case, lighted it, blew a thin line of blue smoke toward the moon, and smiled. Chapter 18. Miriam and Bwana were sitting on the veranda together the following day when a horseman appeared in the distance riding across the plain toward the bungalow. Bwana shaded his eyes with his hand and gazed out toward the oncoming rider. He was puzzled. Strangers were few in Central Africa. Even the blacks, for a distance of many miles in every direction, were well known to him. No white man came within 100 miles. That word of his coming did not reach Bwana long before the stranger. His every move was reported to the big Bwana. Just what animals he killed and how many of each species, how he killed them too, for Bwana would not permit the use of prussic acid or strychnine, and how he treated his boys. Several European sportsmen had been turned back to the coast by the big Englishman's orders because of unwarranted cruelty to their black followers, and one, whose name had long been heralded in civilized communities as that of a great sportsman, was driven from Africa with orders never to return when Bwana found that his big bag of 14 lions had been made by the diligent use of poisoned bait. The result was that all good sportsmen and all the natives loved and respected him. His word was law where there had never been law before. There was scarce a headman from coast to coast who would not heed the big Bwana's commands in preference to those of the hunters who employed them, and so it was easy to turn back any undesirable stranger. Bwana had simply to threaten to order his boys to desert him, but there was evidently one who had slipped into the country unheralded. Bwana could not imagine who the approaching horseman might be. After the manner of frontier hospitality, the globe round, he met the newcomer at the gate, welcoming him even before he had dismounted. He saw a tall, well-knit man of 30 or over, blond of hair and smooth-shaven. There was a tantalizing familiarity about him that convinced Bwana that he should be able to call the visitor by name, yet he was unable to do so. The newcomer was evidently of Scandinavian origin. Both his appearance and accent denoted that. His manner was rough but open. He made a good impression upon the Englishman, who was wont to accept strangers in this wild and savage country at their own valuation, asking no questions and assuming the best of them until they proved themselves undeserving of his friendship and hospitality. "It is rather unusual that a white man comes unheralded," he said, as they walked together toward the field into which he had suggested that the traveler might turn his pony. "My friends, the natives, keep us rather well posted." "It is probably due to the fact that I came from the south," explained the stranger, "that you did not hear of my coming. I have seen no village for several marches." "No, there are none to the south of us for many miles," replied Bwana. "Since Kovudu deserted his country, I rather doubt that one could find a native in that direction under 200 or 300 miles. Bwana was wondering how a lone white man could have made his way through the savage, unhospitable miles that lay toward the south. As though guessing what must be passing through the other's mind, the stranger vouchsafed an explanation. "I came down from the north to do a little trading and hunting," he said, "and got way off the beaten track. My head man, who was the only member of the safari who had ever before been in the country, took sick and died. We could find no natives to guide us, and so I simply swung back straight north. We have been living on the fruits of our guns for over a month. Didn't have an idea there was a white man within 1,000 miles of us when we camped last night by a water hole at the edge of the plain. This morning I started out to hunt and saw the smoke from your chimney, so I sent my gun-bearer back to camp with the good news and rode straight over here myself. Of course I've heard of you. Everybody who comes into Central Africa does. And I'd be mighty glad of permission to rest up and hunt around here for a couple of weeks." "Certainly," replied Bwana. "Move your camp up close to the river below my boys' camp and make yourself at home." They had reached the veranda now, and Bwana was introducing the stranger to Miriam and my dear, who had just come from the bungalow's interior. "This is Mr. Hanson," he said, using the name the man had given him. "He is a trader who has lost his way in the jungle to the south." My dear and Miriam bowed their acknowledgments of the introduction. The man seemed rather ill at ease in their presence. His host attributed this to the fact that his guest was unaccustomed to the society of cultured women. and so found a pretext to quickly extricate him from his seemingly unpleasant position and lead him away to his study and the brandy and soda, which were evidently much less embarrassing to Mr. Hanson. When the two had left them, Miriam turned toward "My dear." "It is odd," she said, "but I could almost swear that I had known Mr. Hanson in the past. It is odd, but quite impossible," and she gave the matter no further thought. Hanson did not accept Bwana's invitation to move his camp closer to the bungalow. He said his boys were inclined to be quarrelsome, and so were better off at a distance, and he, himself, was around but little, and then always avoided coming into contact with the ladies. A fact which naturally aroused only laughing comment on the rough trader's bashfulness. He accompanied the men on several hunting trips where they found him perfectly at home and well versed in all the finer points of big game hunting. Of an evening, he often spent much time with the white foreman of the big farm, evidently finding in the society of this rougher man more common interests than the cultured guests of Bwana possessed for him. So it came that his was a familiar figure about the premises by night. He came and went as he saw fit, often wandering along in the great flower garden that was the especial pride and joy of my dear and Miriam. The first time that he had been surprised there, he apologized gruffly, explaining that he had always been fond of the good old blooms of northern Europe, which my dear had so successfully transplanted in African soil. Was it, though, the ever-beautiful blossoms of hollyhocks and phlox that drew him to the perfumed air of the garden, or that other infinitely more beautiful flower who wandered often among the blooms beneath the great moon? The black-haired, sun-tanned Miriam? For 3 weeks Hanson had remained. During this time he said that his boys were resting and gaining strength after their terrible ordeals in the untracked jungle to the south, but he had not been as idle as he appeared to have been. He divided his small following into 2 parties, entrusting the leadership of each to men whom he believed that he could trust. To them he explained his plans and the rich reward that they would win from him if they carried his designs to a successful conclusion. One party he moved very slowly northward along the trail that connects with the great caravan routes entering the Sahara from the south. The other he ordered straight westward, with orders to halt and go into permanent camp just beyond the great river which marks the natural boundary of the country that the big Bwana rightfully considers almost his own. To his host he explained that he was moving his safari slowly toward the north. He said nothing of the party moving westward. Then, one day, he announced that half his boys had deserted, for a hunting party from the bungalow had come across his northerly camp, and he feared that they might have noticed the reduced numbers of his following. And thus matters stood when, one hot night, Miriam, unable to sleep, rose and wandered out into the garden. The Honorable Morrison had been urging his suit once more that evening, and the girl's mind was in such a turmoil that she had been unable to sleep. The wide heavens about her seemed to promise a greater freedom from doubt and questioning. Baines had urged her to tell him that she loved him. A dozen times she thought that she might honestly give him the answer that he demanded. Korak Fast was becoming but a memory. That he was dead she had come to believe, since otherwise he would have sought her out. She did not know that he had even better reason to believe her dead, and that it was because of that belief he had made no effort to find her after his raid upon the village of Kovudu. Behind a great flowering shrub, Hanson lay gazing at the stars and waiting. He had lain thus and there many nights before. For what was he waiting, or for whom? He heard the girl approaching, and half raised himself to his elbow. A dozen paces away, the reins looped over a fence post, stood his pony. Miriam, walking slowly, approached the bush behind which the waiter lay. Hanson drew a large bandana handkerchief from his pocket and rose stealthily to his knees. A pony neighed down at the corrals. Far out across the plain a lion roared. Hanson changed his position until he squatted upon both feet, ready to come erect quickly. Again the pony neighed. This time closer. There was the sound of his body brushing against shrubbery. Hansen heard and wondered how the animal had gotten from the corral, for it was evident that he was already in the garden. The man turned his head in the direction of the beast. What he saw sent him to the ground, huddled close beneath the shrubbery. A man was coming, leading 2 ponies. Miriam heard now and stopped to look and listen. A moment later, the Honorable Morrison Baines drew near, the 2 saddled mounts at his heels. Miriam looked up at him in surprise. The Honorable Morrison grinned sheepishly. "I couldn't sleep," he explained, "and was going for a bit of a ride when I chanced to see you out here, and I thought you'd like to join me. Ripping good sport, you know, night riding. Come on." Miriam laughed. The adventure appealed to her. "All right," she said. Hansen swore beneath his breath. The 2 led their horses from the garden to the gate and through it. There they discovered Hansen's mount. "Why, here's the trader's pony," remarked Baines. "He's probably down visiting with the foreman," said Miriam. "Pretty late for him, isn't it?" remarked the Honorable Morrison. "I'd hate to have to ride back through that jungle at night to his camp." As though to give weight to his apprehensions, the distant lion roared again. The Honorable Morrison shivered and glanced at the girl to note the effect of the uncanny sound upon her. She appeared not to have noticed it. A moment later, the 2 had mounted and were moving slowly across the moon-bathed plain. The girl turned her pony's head straight toward the jungle. It was in the direction of the roaring of the hungry lion. "Hadn't we better steer clear of that fellow?" suggested the Honorable Morrison. "I guess you didn't hear him." "Yes, I heard him," laughed Miriam. "Let's ride over and call on him." The Honorable Morrison laughed uneasily. He didn't care to appear at a disadvantage before this girl, nor did he care, either, to approach a hungry lion too closely at night. He carried his rifle in his saddle boot. But moonlight is an uncertain light to shoot by, nor ever had he faced a lion alone, even by day. The thought gave him a distinct nausea. The beast ceased his roaring now. They heard him no more, and the Honorable Morrison gained courage accordingly. They were riding downwind toward the jungle. The lion lay in a little swale to their right. He was old. For 2 nights he had not fed, for no longer was his charge as swift or his spring as mighty as in the days of his prime when he spread terror among the creatures of his wild domain. For 2 nights and days he had gone empty, and for a long time before that he had fed only upon carrion. He was old, but he was yet a terrible engine of destruction. At the edge of the forest, the Honorable Morrison drew rein. He had no desire to go further. Numa, silent upon his padded feet, crept into the jungle beyond them. The wind, now, was blowing gently between him and his intended prey. He had come a long way in search of man, for even in his youth he had tasted human flesh, and while it was poor stuff by comparison with eland and zebra, it was less difficult to kill. In Numa's estimation, man was a slow-witted, slow-footed creature which commanded no respect unless accompanied by the acrid odor which spelled to the monarch's sensitive nostrils the great noise and the blinding flash of an express rifle. He caught the dangerous scent tonight, but he was ravenous to madness. He would face a dozen rifles, if necessary, to fill his empty belly. He circled about into the forest that he might again be downwind from his victims, for should they get his scent, he could not hope to overtake them. Numa was famished, but he was old and crafty. Deep in the jungle, another caught faintly the scent of man and of Numa both. He raised his head and sniffed. He cocked it upon one side and listened. "Come on," said Miriam. "Let's ride, in a way. The forest is wonderful at night. It is open enough to permit us to ride." The Honorable Morrison hesitated. He shrank from revealing his fear in the presence of the girl. A braver man, sure of his own position, would have had the courage to have refused uselessly to expose the girl to danger. He would not have thought of himself at all, but the egotism of the Honorable Morrison required that he think always of self first. He had planned the ride to get Miriam away from the bungalow. He wanted to talk to her alone and far enough away, so should she take offense at his purposed suggestion, he would have time in which to attempt to right himself in her eyes before they reached home. He had little doubt, of course, but that he should succeed. But it is to his credit that he did have some slight doubts. "You needn't be afraid of the lion," said Miriam, noting his slight hesitancy. "There hasn't been a man-eater around here for 2 years, Bwana says, and the game is so plentiful that there is no necessity to drive Numa to human flesh. Then he has been so often hunted that he rather keeps out of man's way." "Oh, I'm not afraid of lions," replied the Honorable Morrison. "I was just thinking what a beastly uncomfortable place a forest is to ride in. What with the underbrush and the low branches and all that, it's not exactly cut out for pleasure riding." "Let's go afoot then," suggested Miriam, and started to dismount. "Oh, no," cried the Honorable Morrison, aghast at this suggestion. "Let's ride." And he reined his pony into the dark shadows of the wood. Behind him came Miriam, and in front, prowling ahead, waiting a favorable opportunity, skulked Numa, the lion. Out upon the plain, a lone horseman muttered a low curse as he saw the two disappear from sight. It was Hansen. He had followed them from the bungalow. Their way led in the direction of his camp, so he had a ready and plausible excuse should they discover him. But they had not seen him, for they had not turned their eyes behind. Now he turned directly toward the spot at which they had entered the jungle. He no longer cared whether he was observed or not. There were 2 reasons for his indifference. The first was that he saw in Baines's act a counterpart of his own planned abduction of the girl. In some way he might turn the thing to his own purposes. At least he would keep in touch with them and make sure that Baines did not get her. His other reason was based on his knowledge of an event that had transpired at his camp the previous night, an event which he had not mentioned at the bungalow for fear of drawing undesired attention to his movements and bringing the blacks of the Big Bwana into dangerous intercourse with his own boys. He had told at the bungalow that half his men had deserted. That story might be quickly disproved should his boys and Bwanas grow confidential. The event that he had failed to mention and which now urged him hurriedly after the girl and her escort had occurred during his absence early the preceding evening. His men had been sitting around their campfire, entirely encircled by a high thorn boma, when, without the slightest warning, a huge lion had leaped amongst them and seized one of their number. It had been solely due to the loyalty and courage of his comrades that his life had been saved, and then only after a battle royal with the hunger-enraged beast had they been able to drive him off with burning brands, spears, and rifles. From this, Hansen knew that a man-eater had wandered into the district or been developed by the aging of one of the many lions who ranged the plains and hills by night or lay up in the cool wood by day. He had heard the roaring of a hungry lion not half an hour before, and there was little doubt in his mind but that the man-eater was stalking Miriam and Baines. He cursed the Englishman for a fool and spurred rapidly after them. Miriam and Baines had drawn up in a small, natural clearing. 100 yards beyond them, Numa lay crouching in the underbrush, his yellow-green eyes fixed upon his prey, the tip of his sinuous tail jerking spasmodically. He was measuring the distance between him and them. He was wondering if he dared venture a charge, or should he wait yet a little longer in the hope that they might ride straight into his jaws. He was very hungry, but also was he very crafty. He could not chance losing his meat by a hasty and ill-considered rush. Had he waited the night before until the blacks slept, he would not have been forced to go hungry for another 24 hours. Behind him, the other that had caught his scent and that of man together came to a sitting posture upon the branch of a tree in which he had reposed himself for slumber. Beneath him a lumbering gray hulk swayed to and fro in the darkness. The beast in the tree uttered a low guttural and dropped to the back of the gray mass. He whispered a word in one of the great ears, and Tantor, the elephant, raised his trunk aloft, swinging it high and low to catch the scent that the word had warned him of. There was another whispered word. Was it a command? And the lumbering beast wheeled into an awkward yet silent shuffle in the direction of Numa, the lion, and the stranger Tarmangani his rider had scented. Onward they went, the scent of the lion and his prey becoming stronger and stronger. Numa was becoming impatient. How much longer must he wait for his meat to come his way? He lashed his tail viciously now. He almost growled. All unconscious of their danger, the man and the girl sat talking in the little clearing. Their horses were pressed side by side. Baines had found Miriam's hand and was pressing it as he poured words of love into her ear, and Miriam was listening. "Come to London with me," urged the Honorable Morrison. "I can gather a safari, and we can be a whole day upon the way to the coast before they guess that we have gone." "Why must we go that way?" asked the girl. "Bwana and my dear would not object to our marriage." "I cannot marry you just yet," explained the Honorable Morrison. "There are some formalities to be attended to first. You do not understand. It will be all right. We will go to London. I cannot wait. If you love me, you will come." "What of the apes you lived with? Did they bother about marriage?" "They love as we love. Had you stayed among them, you would have mated as they mate. It is the law of nature. No man-made law can abrogate the laws of God. What difference does it make if we love one another? What do we care for anyone in the world besides ourselves? I would give my life for you. Will you give nothing for me?" "You love me?" she said. "You will marry me when we have reached London?" "I swear it," he cried. "I will go with you," she whispered, "though I do not understand why it is necessary." She leaned toward him, and he took her in his arms and bent to press his lips to hers. At the same instant, the head of a huge tusker poked through the trees that fringed the clearing. The Honorable Morrison and Miriam, with eyes and ears for one another alone, did not see or hear, but Numa did. The man upon Tantor's broad head saw the girl in the man's arms. It was Korak. But in the trim figure of the neatly garbed girl he did not recognize his Miriam. He only saw a Tarmangani with his she. And then Numa charged. With a frightful roar, fearful lest Tantor had come to frighten away his prey, the great beast leaped from his hiding place. The earth trembled to his mighty voice. The ponies stood for an instant transfixed with terror. The Honorable Morrison Baines went white and cold. The lion was charging toward them full in the brilliant light of the magnificent moon. The muscles of the Honorable Morrison no longer obeyed his will. They flexed to the urge of a greater power. The power of nature's first law. They drove his spurred heels deep into his pony's flanks. They bore the rein against the brute's neck that wheeled him with an impetuous drive toward the plain and safety. The girl's pony, squealing in terror, reared and plunged upon the heels of his mate. The lion was close upon him. Only the girl was cool. The girl and the half-naked savage who bestrode the neck of his mighty mount and grinned at the exciting spectacle chance had staked for his enjoyment. To Korak here were but two strange Tarmangani pursued by Numa, who was empty. It was Numa's right to prey, but one was a she. Korak felt an intuitive urge to rush to her protection. Why, he could not guess. All Tarmangani were enemies now. He had lived too long a beast to feel strongly the humanitarian impulses that were inherent in him. Yet feel them he did, for the girl at least. He urged Tantor forward. He raised his heavy spear and hurled it at the flying target of the lion's body. The girl's pony had reached the trees upon the opposite side of the clearing. Here he would become easy prey to the swiftly moving lion. But Numa, infuriated, preferred the woman upon his back. It was for her he leaped. Korak gave an exclamation of astonishment and approval as Numa landed upon the pony's rump, and at the same instant the girl swung free of her mount to the branches of a tree above her. Korak's spear struck Numa in the shoulder, knocking him from his precarious hold upon the frantically plunging horse. Freed of the weight of both girl and lion, the pony raced ahead toward safety. Numa tore and struck at the missile in his shoulder, but could not dislodge it. Then he resumed the chase. Korak guided Tantor into the seclusion of the jungle. He did not wish to be seen, nor had he. Hansen had almost reached the wood when he heard the lion's terrific roars and knew that the charge had come. An instant later, the Honorable Morrison broke upon his vision, racing like mad for safety. The man lay flat upon his pony's back, hugging the animal's neck tightly with both arms and digging the spurs into his sides. An instant later, the second pony appeared, riderless. Hansen groaned as he guessed what had happened out of sight in the jungle. With an oath, he spurred on in the hope of driving the lion from his prey. His rifle was ready in his hand, and then the lion came into view behind the girl's pony. Hansen could not understand. He knew that if Numa had succeeded in seizing the girl, he would not have continued in pursuit of the others. He drew in his own mount, took quick aim, and fired. The lion stopped in his tracks, turned and bit at his side, then rolled over dead. Hansen rode on into the forest, calling aloud to the girl. "Here I am," came a quick response from the foliage of the trees just ahead. "Did you hit him?" "Yes," replied Hansen. "Where are you? You had a mighty narrow escape. It will teach you to keep out of the jungle at night." Together they returned to the plain, where they found the Honorable Morrison riding slowly back toward them. He explained that his pony had bolted and that he had had hard work stopping him at all. Hansen grinned, for he recalled the pounding heels that he had seen driving sharp spurs into the flanks of Baines's mount. But he said nothing of what he had seen. He took Miriam up behind him, and the three rode in silence toward the bungalow.